if you're not at all comfortable with boredom, then as you were pointing out, you won't let your mind get where it needs to get to do deeper, more interesting work.
Cal Newport es ingeniero de computación, está acostumbrado a concentrarse para programar software muy complejo. A continuación nos va a dar las claves para conseguir esa concentración que permite la creatividad. ¿Por qué es necesario aburrirse? Bajar el nivel de estímulos, no hacer nada hasta aburrirse para poder crear, hacer algo creativo y conseguir un trabajo profundo en cualquier área.
My argument is that if you have no tolerance for boredom, which is possible today with phones, that you can get rid of every last moment of boredom by looking at your phone. 20 years ago, we had to be bored because you'd be waiting in line, you'd be in car, you would be putting gas, waiting for the gas to pump. And now we could get rid of it. So for example, if you're going to concentrate for a long time on something hard, let's say you're trying to write a poem, at first, it's technically speaking going to feel boring in the sense that your mind is going to want more novel stimuli. It's going to say, why are we just working on this one thing? And if you're not used to boredom, you're going to give up. Your mind will rebel. It will say, enough of this. This is boring. Where's the phone? Where's the social media? And so it's not so much that like the boredom itself is going to generate a lot of insights, but it's something we have to be comfortable with. But there's another thing that we get, which is when you're alone with your own thoughts, a lot of important things happen unrelated to professional progress. It's when you're alone with your own thoughts and it's a little bit boring, is when you make sense of your life. It's when you think through the experiences you have and you reflect on how you're feeling, and you build out and improve the scaffolding on which you hang your whole phenomenological past with your experience of the world. It's how you develop as a human being.
Señor Newport, ¿por qué no está usted en ninguna red social?
Well, I think it depends how you define it, I guess. But yeah, it's true. I've never had a Twitter account or a Facebook account or an Instagram account or a, TikTok. So yes, it's true. I think I may be the last person.
Y si no está en ninguna red social, ¿cómo piensa vender su libro?
I'll tell you what, for people who are creating things, social media is useful in selling it, not because it lets you tell people about it, it lets other people talk about your book. So I'm sure social media has helped my books because other people have talked about them. But I think we overvalue how important it is to be talking about yourself on social media.
¿Cuáles son las cuatro reglas para conseguir un trabajo profundo, creatividad y que nuestra tarea tenga más contenido?
The first rule is work deeply. And what this argues for is actually prioritizing undistracted or deep work. So putting aside time for it, having it something that you schedule, something that you work out potentially even with your boss. How much of this undistracted work should I be doing? When should it happen? Let's agree that during this time, I'm not going to be bothered. So it's all about respecting deep work and making sure that you are putting aside time for it, protecting that time, setting yourself up for success, because that activity, undistracted focus, is really the work that tends to create a lot of value. We have another rule that then says embrace boredom. And what that means is you have to train your ability to do deep work. So you can't just assume because you put aside time and you protected the time and you go somewhere really quiet and now it's time to concentrate really hard. You can't just assume that you are going to be able to concentrate really hard. Concentration, like any other skill, requires practice. If you've been looking at your email and your phone every 2 minutes for the last 10 years, you're probably out of shape when it comes to time to concentration. So it's something you have to practice. And that rule is about all the different ways you might practice it. Then there's probably the most controversially titled rule in the book, at least in the American version, this was called Quit Social Media. But the real idea behind that rule is work backwards from use cases before you adopt a tool. Do not just say, I'm going to sign up for Instagram because I don't know, I heard it's interesting. I'm going to be on Facebook because maybe that's useful for my career. Instead, you should be very specific about what are the value I am getting from this tool, what are the costs I'm getting for this tool. So when you know why you're using a tool and what value you want to get out of a tool, you can put rules in place to get rid of a lot of the cost. And if you can't come up with a really big value, don't waste your time or energy on it. And then the final rule in the American translation is drain the shallows. But what it really means is be really careful about all of the administrative and logistical and other types of non-deep work that take up your schedule.
¿Por qué no iremos a no trabajar a la oficina dentro de 5 años?
I wrote this article in the New Yorker last year that made this argument that there was this one thinker named Peter Drucker. He really set the agenda on how we should do knowledge work. And one of his big points was you have to give people autonomy. Let people figure out on their own how they're going to organize their work. This is not a factory. You can't tell people, here's step one, here's step two, step three. And he invented this idea that you should manage by objectives. Tell people what you want, but let them figure out how to get their work done. My argument, and that was very influential, and that dominates the way we think about it today. But my argument is when you leave it up to individuals to figure out, well, how do you actually do your day-to-day work? That was the environment in which we stumbled into this world where the answer became, well, let's just talk to each other all day long and figure things out on the fly. That culture of autonomy created the conditions in which our work is terribly inefficient, because this new way of working where you're not on Zoom all day and doing 70 things is actually also better for workers. So that's my optimism, is that it didn't, in that original New Yorker article, I said it's going to change right away. People won't put up with being on Zoom 8 hours a day. We're going to reinvent the office. Didn't happen. But it did plant the seeds for some people to figure it out. And I think that's going to grow in the next 4 or 5 years.